So you all have done a great job at networking. Now you've got an interview. You're coming in to the company for your first interview. Who's nervous? So when I was going in, I remember one of my first face-to-face interviews. I won't tell you what year, but it's been a while. I went in and I lived at home at the time still, and so I said to my mom, what should I wear? What should I wear to the interview? She said, you need to wear a coat and a tie and go in and represent in that way. Now, it was working for a department store, so that kind of made sense. So I'm wondering, from your all's perspectives, in today's world of varying dress codes at varying companies, what your advice is to all of these wonderful job seekers around first impressions and how they can represent themselves the best for their first interview.
First impressions are everything, I would say. I had a very similar experience. I remember my first professional job. I was extremely underdressed. I had a button up, and that was the best advice I ever gave was you can never be too, well, maybe in San Francisco with the tech boom, but you can never be overdressed for an interview. And that's especially true with a recruiter. I think coming in overdressed is far better than coming in underdressed. Some other things too when it comes to first impressions, I always like to remind candidates that you are interviewing the second you arrive at the company. So be mindful of your time. Don't be late. Don't be too early either. That's just as bad if you show up an hour early for it. Be aware of your interactions with everyone. That could be the receptionist at the front desk. That could be the security guard. I asked them about candidates. What was your interaction like with this person? Were they kind? Were they cordial? Things like that. Be mindful in the waiting area as well. If you're playing Candy Crush on your phone, or you're having a conversation with your best friend or your ex or whatever, I just heard it all. Just be very cognizant of that because we do observe it, and it does play a big factor in a lot of people's
cameras.
decisions.
I always like looking at, oh, there she is, there he is.
Right.
I don't know, maybe it's just where I've worked, but in my experience, I have seen candidates get dinged for being overdressed. So I think you really need to know the audience. This is some practical advice, but I've told this to a lot of my friends. Find the company's actual physical location. Go look at the geotags on Instagram and see what their employees are posting and see what they're wearing and do 2 steps up. So if you're looking at a tech company and everyone's wearing hoodies and jeans, maybe you should wear a nice button up, but you still have your jeans on, because if you walk in there with a suit, it's not going to be a culture fit. But one thing, hygiene. You can be casual, but your hygiene needs to be on point. So I hate having to say that, but I've seen cases where that wasn't taken into consideration.
And not overly cologned or perfumed
Yeah,
either on the
yeah,
other side of
yeah,
things.
Yeah.
Be shaved. I know we live in San Francisco, but if you're going to wear a skirt, it's your right, but it's still kind of off-putting. I've had that happen where a female came in, she wore a skirt, and she didn't shave, and it was for maybe years. And, you have to think, I know we're very liberal here in San Francisco, but it's also a business. We have companies, and at the time, the company that she was interviewing for is in the financial sector, so it doesn't matter how liberal we are. It's a finance that if you're going to wear a skirt, you're going to show your legs, at least be shaved, So you think about those little things, and then maybe once you get the job, you can go hair all you want. It's going to be hard to get rid of you at that point, So, but it's true. Just
Good old California.
yeah, I always say smart casual works. That's an actual term. You can Google what that looks like. It's like what she said. You can wear the jeans and a button up. That works probably for almost any job interview in San Francisco Bay Area. So.
And I would say on top of obviously what you're physically wearing, come prepared with materials. You should have a printed off resume for everyone that you're going to be meeting with. You should have, you should have done your research and been super creepy on LinkedIn and know everything about the people that are interviewing you. You should have 3 questions for each of them that are different from the rest, because at the end, you'd be like, Everett, what did they ask you? Oh, weird. Ask me the same 3 questions. Clearly, they didn't really, do a lot of research about us or our company. So I would say coming in with all of that material ready is definitely going to put you over the edge versus like other people too.
Yeah.
So, as an add-on to what you just kind of talked about, during the interview process, what's your biggest pet peeve with candidates?
People who talk around your question or don't answer it at all. That one's pretty rough.
That's a good. So do you guys, I know a lot of you guys are HR majors, but a lot of the industry is changing behavioral-based interview questions. It's a lot of the questions we ask now. So I think, to your point, not having readied answers is like a big thing. So you're supposed to, it's super silly, but it's called a STAR format. And, you put your situation, your, I forgot what the task. I was like, come on, guys. Team effort. But it's an acronym. You guys can, I'm not going to bore you with it, but it's called behavioral-based interview questions. And those are the questions that you should really prep yourself on, because same thing, we're going to ask pretty much the same general questions about certain skill sets. And if you tiptoe around it, like automatically, I'm like, we're both wasting our time right now.
I have two pet peeves. One is when people, and hiring managers too, hate hearing, if you look at my resume, I'm like, I actually had a hiring manager throw the resume out the room. And he's like, I'm asking you a question. I don't want to hear what's on your resume. I want to hear about you. And when they ask you that, never say, if you can just take that out of your vocabulary, you'll go so far, Of course, we've read your resume, but we want to see if you know your resume, because some people don't know their resume. Someone else wrote it for them. So just know your resume. Don't ever say, if you look at my resume, because usually at that point, I don't even send you forward. I'll finish the interview because I'm nice. But you'll get an email in a 2 hours saying that we passed. So, but also another thing that from hiring managers, and also for me, is when people are not humble. Like, it's great if you're the best, if your company gave you awards that you're the best at this, and that. But we like to hire people who can be part of a team and who can solve things, So don't be like, oh, I'm like the best marketing person on my last team. I brought in $1 million. The team couldn't live without me. Well, if that's the case, then why are you here? So that happens a lot. And some people might feel like, well, it just shows how valuable I am. But one, you applied to the job. I didn't even find you on LinkedIn. You applied. If I found you on LinkedIn, then I would want that information. But if you apply for a job, you're an applicant. So it's really what we call passive and recruiting. Like, we rather hire someone who's employed that we want to go after. But if you're an applicant, we're still going to interview you, but we just want to know about you. And I just don't like when people, and I've had a hiring manager today email me, a candidate did that exact thing, and she's like, I'm going to pass on her. She just kept talking about how great she is and how this and that, and it just fell apart for her.
Yeah, that's definitely, I've seen a lot of candidates who I thought were fantastic in paper, and my conversations with them were great, but it fell apart when they met with the hiring manager because they put it into overdrive.
Yeah.
I know when I used to do a lot of university recruiting and I used to interview a lot of students, I would always ask them about group projects and, show me an example of a group project and what did you contribute. And it was always a red flag for me if they start saying things like, oh, well, I ended up doing everything because no one else was participating, or I had to do everything because of this or that or whatever. And you know what? It's probably true. You probably had awful people as your group project, colleagues. But what that sounds like to me is like, I can't work on a team and I'm a martyr. So, at least everywhere I've worked, it's always been very team oriented. And if someone can't collaborate, they're not going to do well at the places I've worked.
Yeah.
So, we're here to learn about the secrets of getting a job. And so I think it would be great for you all to share with the group out here what your best or favorite interview question is for candidates, so that they can get a leg up when they come to your company and interview.
I would say I always love when people ask about our culture because, this, like, a job is a big deal. You're going to be spending a lot of your life and a lot of your hours there. So you better like where you're going to be working. And I think sometimes, especially, you know, I've been there, you just graduated and it's just, you're throwing resumes everywhere. You're like, please, for the love of God, just get me a job. And you don't think about the culture. You don't think about the company. And that's a huge miss on your guys' part. So I think when someone asks me about our culture and kind of steps away from just the actual job or job description and shows that they're interested in the company and, you know, what the company is about, that's always a great sign for me and one of my favorite questions.
For me, I like to ask them to describe times whenever they were able to impact people's lives. And then I ask them, what would those people say about you to me if I were to talk to them about it? And the reason why I ask this question a lot is because it can be very revealing to people's character. And I like to understand what kind of character these people have so that I'll understand how you'll work in a team environment. A lot of times we have, you know, open spaces with office culture nowadays, and it's really important to see if this person is going to be uplifting to their colleagues. And the reason why I like to ask that is because, you know, as a recruiter, I want my client to come back and say, you know what, Everett, you did an awesome job. You placed Shirley here last week, and everybody on the team loves her. She's uplifting. She's making a positive impact in our culture, because it does a few different things. One, it gets me more business, and that's great for me, and it's challenging, and that's great. But it also is really good for the business itself. It leads to higher retention rates, higher productivity, creativity, and it fosters a really nice culture. So for me, I always like to ask that question, or something similar to it.
I have two. One I actually stole from an interview I had at Google, and I use it all the time because it was fabulous. The first one is, what's the worst thing anyone ever said about you? And when I got the question, I was like, you know, of course I could have went way left but you know, I understood what the question meant. So I think that's and I use that, and it's actually been a great conversation starter with candidates. Another one, since I work at Williams-Sonoma, is since we are, you know, a home luxury type brand, I ask, what is your favorite room in your home and why? That one shows if you actually read up about us, you know, and you know, you can tell me. Of course, you know, we started in kitchenware, so a lot of people say the kitchen, you know, but we sell other things for the home. So so it's usually, like they say, those behavioral questions. And it's not really just to see if you don't like the kitchen. It's just really just getting to know you a little bit better. So don't overthink the answers, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like, even when they ask me, what's the worst thing someone said about me? My answer was, they said that I'm dependable. And that's not true. Yes, I get my work done, but I know when to say no. I don't overexert myself. And that's how I answered the question. And that got a like, hey, that's a good answer, you know?
Great. I want to take a step back for a minute and talk about the resume, because, you know, that gets you in the door and gets you to your interview. But oftentimes people put things on resumes that they're questioning, you know, is this the right thing to put on the resume? And a great example is that you might be part of a demographic that may or may not match with the company. You might be on a nonprofit board, or you might be participating in a nonprofit. At one point, I had advice in my career to leave some things off the resume because it might have hurt me in getting in the door. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so whenever I am especially working with students, I always say go for a hybrid resume. So there's typically 3 different types. There's functional, which is if you did it for the last 15 years, that's it. That's their one function. There's chronological, where you kind of just throw everything on there. You know, from the age of 15, I was a dog walker, and then you just kind of keep working from there. The reason I say hybrid is because you might not have a lot of work experience, but that's where putting projects on there is going to be really helpful. So, you know, for an example, maybe the job you're applying to has something to do with corporate social responsibility and nonprofit. That would be a great time to put that you worked on a nonprofit board on there. But if it's completely left field and if it has nothing to do for the job you want, you probably shouldn't put it on your resume. So pulling from projects that you worked on, or pulling, or even past experience, highlighting specifically, you know, why that past role will match up with this future role is going to help you a lot. So I would always say, like, tailor your resume to the job. And I know you guys are going to roll your eyes because I hear a lot of students like, oh, I just don't want to. If you don't take 5 minutes to redo your resume, maybe you don't want the job as bad as you think you do. So that's always something to think about too. It's like, if I don't want to redo this, do I really want it? Because that's going to put you ahead.
I think it kind of depends. I'd say yes and no for certain things. You asked, is it advantageous to leave certain things off of your resume based on whatever the company is like? I work with to give you a real world example, I work with a large labor union. Labor unions tend to be a little bit more politically centered towards liberal concepts and liberal ideas. So in that particular situation, I've had really qualified candidates who are great talent-wise get rejected from hiring managers because maybe they had something that kind of pictured or painted them as more conservative. Maybe that's either through an organization that they volunteered with, maybe they did a campaign way back when they were just fresh out of college, it was for a Republican or something. They're not, you know, they're very pro-union now, but maybe that will tarnish their resume. So in that particular case, I would say yes. I always encourage them. It's going to impact you potentially negatively, so I would encourage them to take it off their resume. So that's knowing the company that you're applying for. I would say yes, leave certain things on if it's like diversity related. I think diversity and inclusion is kind of at the forefront of all, especially nonprofits that we work with, but even corporate America nowadays. So if it's something that makes you diverse and can bring something different to the company, I say chance it out and leave it on there because it could work in your favor.
And if it doesn't, you might not want to work there anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, the two classic things to leave off your resume is your picture and your age. Like, you shouldn't do that. But, you know, for things like interest or hobbies, I've heard from both sides where people don't want to see that because they don't feel it's relevant, and other times people have gotten through because they wrote that sailing was a hobby, and perchance that, you know, hiring manager loved sailing and wanted to talk to this person just for that. So honestly, if you have space on your resume and you want to include it and you feel like it's a defining feature of you, then you should include it. I mean, look at your resume as real estate, and you want to put what you find most valuable on that real estate. And if that happens to be some of your hobbies or interests, you know, go ahead. It might not resonate with every single hiring manager and recruiter, but it's probably going to resonate with some of them.
I also think leaving off, and I've seen this on resumes, I just don't know where people get this from. They write why they left the previous job on the resume, and they write also if it was a full-time or a part-time job. Don't need to know that. Now, if you are working as a consultant, yes, you should put that on there, because that may explain the short time you were there. We all understand that consultants are project-based. So if you were a consultant and you were only at a job for 3 to 6 months, then right, you were a consultant, and we all understand that that was obviously a project-based job. But I don't need to know that you left because, you know, your prior manager was a jerk and you decided to leave. That was on a resume. Hand to God. You know, so, but yeah, but, you know, just be smart.
One of my pet peeves as a hiring manager, I haven't done any hiring lately, but it used to be when I was hiring, was this concept of putting an objective on your resume. I didn't really love that because I thought your objective is to get a job. That's your objective. You really should put a summary of what have you done in a sentence, in a few bullet points, to be able to convey at the very top of your resume, again, an elevator speech, versus my objective is to get a position in marketing, digital marketing, and become the best that I can be. It's not the greatest thing. So I always thought that was a pet peeve of mine. I don't know if you guys share that as recruiters of today.
I just don't like when people don't know the difference between objective and summary.
Yeah.
I do recommend objectives if you're moving into a career that you haven't done before. That's what I did. and that's what got me noticed when I moved into technology. Because prior to that, my college degree was in communication, and then I got a second degree in cybersecurity, and I was entry level. So I did use an objective and actually had a job lined up 2 days after graduation. But a summary, yes. A summary is, I recommend, you don't have to, well, in technology, you don't really have to have it. I'm a technical recruiter, but when I was recruiting for marketing and those type of jobs, yes, they are handy. And actually, they're almost expected. Also, a cover letter is expected in those type of roles. Finance, technology, legal, HR. Please have a cover letter, so, yeah.
So, if you work for a large company, sometimes it takes a lot of time to get people around the table for interviews and get people scheduled, and that leaves candidates out in the lurch a little bit. So this is kind of a twofold question. One is, during the process of application, how do you recommend that they stay in contact with you? And then if they haven't gotten the job, how do they stay on your radar?
If someone is actively interviewing, we're going to be in contact. There shouldn't be an issue there. As far as if they interviewed and they didn't get the job, honestly, all the recruiters are going to say sort of the same thing. Thank you so much for your time. We really enjoyed meeting you. We're going to keep your resume on hand. If anything opens up with, that aligns with your, specialty, we'll call you. And that happens like once out of every 12 times. Sometimes, you just don't get the role. And, add the recruiter on LinkedIn. Once again, LinkedIn. Add everyone you met with on LinkedIn. Even if you didn't get the job, you at least have those connections. And once you make that connection, like when I go on LinkedIn and I get my little notification saying like, blah, 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 I just got a new job, or blah, 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 did this or that. Like sometimes it reminds me and triggers me like, oh yeah, I liked that person. Wait, I think I might have something for them, and I'll reach out. So, when you're getting an average of like 200 to like 1,000 candidates for a role, like it's hard to keep up with a lot of people. You just, use social media to stay on their radar.
I say use email. LinkedIn as well. Email is always a good tool. I think it's very passive. I can answer it when I want to, when I get around to it. But I think, what I encourage candidates to do, we meet with so many people. It's just impossible to remember everyone. I always let them know, stay up to date on the company's job board. See what positions that they're, actively recruiting for in the moment. If you truly feel like you're a good quality candidate for it and a good fit, send me a quick email with your updated resume and a couple of sentences why you think you're a good fit, and hopefully, and you applied. I always recommend doing that first. And that's just the easiest way to stay on my radar. I don't always check LinkedIn as much either. It gets distracting, but for me, it's definitely email. Not necessarily a call. Call can be a little bit intrusive sometimes.
I was gonna say, be persistent, but don't be that person that's too persistent. Like, if we say we're gonna get back to you in 2 weeks, we're not lying to you. That's just our timeline. So, when you follow up with us every single day, that does ding you. I know you're excited to hear back, and we're excited to give you news, but sometimes that can look poorly on a candidate. And, if you do, unfortunately, don't get the role, accept that with grace. I have had a lot of, especially in, intern-wise, people that I would have loved to push through to another role, but they were just super sour after and kind of sent not so nice things back. And it's like, wow, good thing we didn't, accept you. And now I'm not going to even consider you for other roles. So yes, that role might not have worked out, but just accept it with grace, and just know that, we really do mean it when we say we're going to reach back out with other opportunities. But on the flip side, definitely keep looking at jobs too, that, you think you'd be a good fit for.
And I agree with the email works. There are some companies, when you email with our applicant tracking system, they merge. So be careful what you write in the email if you're sour, because it actually goes on your profile. So when you email us, it's, it goes into the applicant tracking system. So everything that's under your name, any email you ever sent me, any email I sent you, it's all tracked. And so, I'm always going to be nice because I don't want anyone, So you be careful, don't burn bridges. And even when I was an applicant, I used to hate when recruiters didn't get back to me because sometimes it happens. Like you don't get back to someone and you're like, oh, I guess I didn't get the job. It's been a month. I try not to do that myself because I've been on that side. Sometimes you'll get an email from me at 1 a.m. because I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to email Jason and say, unfortunately, but call me tomorrow and we could talk about what happened and maybe it can help you for your next opportunity, So, not all recruiters are like that, but because I've been on both sides, so I'm always like that. I'm probably a little too passionate, but but always be kind. That's my word of advice. Be kind, even when you're let down.
Great, thank you. What questions do you guys have?
What is an ideal size of a resume? Because I get to hear that you have to your resume short, like 1 page or something. Since I have 6 years of experience, I have a lot of things to write.
I usually keep it at 1 page per 10 years. That's just a rule of thumb. If you've got if you have something that's really, really specialized and there's a lot, I look at technical resumes and just the list of languages and tools that they use is like a page. Use a little more, but like I said, tailor it to your experience and to your audience and your demographic. Like tech resumes are ridiculously long, academic resumes are ridiculously long, marketing resumes are not. So, but usually 10 years to 1 page is, I think, like a rule of thumb.
I agree. It's depending on your career. First, your resume shouldn't go past 10 years. Anything 10 years ago, technology has changed, everything's changed. No one cares. So do not put COBOL on your resume. But keeping it to, I always say probably under 4 pages. But it has to be quality stuff. Just don't ramble on your resume, So I would say under 4. My resume is currently 4 pages. It's always been 4 pages. I haven't had a problem getting a job. So I just hired like she said, a technical, a software architect the other day, and his was 10 pages. So it was way too long for me, but, he's been doing it for 20 years. So I understood it. So.
Yeah, great. There was a question over here somewhere.
So when you say hybrid, what about, especially with the going back 10 years, how a lot of people fell into unemployment? So where is the credibility for, are you still going to be asking about gaps in unemployment, or should they just highlight what they did during certain years and just kind of stick to that?
Yeah. I always say, your resume shouldn't be just a footprint of your past. It's where you want to go. So if whatever you did in the past is relevant to the position that I'm hiring for, you should put it on there. It might mean that I always use a dog walker. I don't know why. I actually do used to walk dogs. So that's maybe why. But if you're a dog walker for 2 years in between those 2 things that you listed, but has nothing to do with the job that you're applying for, don't put that. And that might just be a conversation piece. But typically during an interview, we're just talking about skill sets. It's not really like, hey, I saw you weren't doing anything for 3 months. What gives? It's more, hey, I saw that you use this one language. Why don't you tell me the project that you worked on with that and how you were involved and, what you specifically did in your role? That's always going to help you more than listing something that's not relevant, in my opinion anyway.
No, I agree. Leave off the jobs that don't matter.
Yeah.
Real estate is important. I say 2 pages or less, but I work with a less technical demographic. So, we typically only go back about 10 to 15 years. So I say put your jobs that you've had that are relative to the job you're seeking, and leave off anything that's not relative to that. And there's tons of templates out there where you can get creative in how you identify gaps or perceived gaps. So, look at different templates, get creative with it. But
Yeah, I was unemployed. I got laid off in 2009 when, so did 2/3 of the world. And, it just goes from the job I had before I was unemployed and then the job I had after I was unemployed. And I don't make a note of it whatsoever, and no one in any interview I've had since 2009 has asked me about it.
Great.
Kind
We'll
of
take-
Sorry.
Cool.
On that
Go
note
ahead.
too, make sure when you guys are bulleting, what you did in a role, it's not just the job description. I think that's kind of like a big pet peeve, and they can probably say the same thing. Is like
Yes.
you always want to show your impact in the role, and that's a big thing. So don't just say, yes, I walked in every day, counted the cash register, and left. Oh, because I streamlined a process, I saved us 10%. Like you always want to put an actual value to what you did somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing.
Totally. Whenever I'm helping my friends redo their resumes, I just say, like, on average, you can go above and below this, but I say 3 bullet points for responsibilities, 2 bullet points for results.
Yeah, I always show results.
That's great. Let's take one more question.
It's related to her question. I worked as lecturer, then I got personal break for 5 years. Now I'm doing this course. So I have experience as lecturer. How can I fill that 5 years teaching experience in my resume? Whatever I handle the subject, I can put it, right? Other than that, how can I make my resume?
Well, it depends what job you want. Like if you want to do marketing, then you should probably start building a portfolio. But if you want to keep lecturing, then that's great. You do a chronological because you've done it before. You honestly just tailor your resume for the job you want. So it's hard to say how you should tailor it if I don't know what job you're looking for. Like, do you want to stay in that same career path? Do you want to pivot? It just depends. Using an objective is a great resource for that, especially if you're looking to make a career move. It just depends.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, you can, exactly what she said. Like, if you use an objective, I think I mentioned this earlier when I switched into technology and cybersecurity, I put that objective. I also mentioned that though, before I was working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car as a manager, so I did that for 9 years. And I just put what built cybersecurity and enterprise together was the company I was applying for had global clients. Well, customer service is what enterprise is about. And I put that in my objective, that my 9 years of customer service dealing with multiple accounts, which were companies, parallel to what this company was looking for per their job description. And so I got a call. I mean, it was wild, so, just try that way.
I think too, sorry if we got time, just tying into gaps, it seems to be a common theme with these questions. Gaps on your resume, I think it's taking a proactive approach is really important as well. I always encourage people, if you're just getting out of school and there's going to be a gap of time where you think you're going to get your first job, or maybe you took time off to raise your children or whatever, make sure you're doing things to keep yourself and your skills up to date. So volunteer, join associations, do meetup groups, things like that, so that you can account for a lot of that gap. And you can spin it in different ways that way on your resume. If you say, I was an active volunteer at this organization for those 3 years, it doesn't look like you were just sitting at home on the couch for 3 years.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, temp.
Yeah.
Work with a staffing agency, temp. It's a great way to just sort of build up your skill set, see what other types of companies there are.
Guess we're done for the night. Is that the hook?
I mean, one advertising agency I was working at, there was a woman who was, oh my God, she was the nicest woman ever. And she, she took a job as she was the temp receptionist while someone was on vacation. And then she became a temp recruitment coordinator. And then from there, she got hired as a contractor at Yelp doing account management, and then she got hired full-time at Salesforce as an account manager. And this was all in the course of 1.5 years that I knew her. And all of that happened because she was temping, essentially. And I mean, there's no shame in that. It's those roles exist. All these companies have literal armies of contractors working. And it's I'm not gonna say it's easy, because it's not, but it's out there, and you should, especially if you're trying to make a change or a pivot, it's an easy way to get some experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you to all of our panelists tonight. It was great to hear about recruiting strategies and secrets. And I'll I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you to our awesome panelists for taking their time out and our moderator. They did this on their own will. It was voluntary. It was outside of their normal work hours. And so I really want to give a huge round of applause to our panelists and thank them. A lot of the information that they shared tonight is something that we're continuously echoing and we're continuously talking about, and you should be continuously thinking about, right? You know, there was a lot of great things talked about, including networking and the importance that networking happens everywhere. For me, it happens on BART all the time, right? That's my like go-to networking spot. So think about where you can be doing your networking. What does that look like to you? I loved some of the things that was talked about in terms of the interviewing and having those individualized questions for each person that you're connecting with, each person that you're interviewing with, and tailoring your resume specific to that position. Someone had mentioned that if you're not willing to tailor your resume, maybe the position's not worth it to you. And I loved that because I think that's crucial. So thank you again for the wonderful insight. And I do have to do a shameless plug because a lot of these things that are talked about are resources that the Office of Career Planning can work with you and talk to you about. We have drop-in hours every Tuesday and Thursday from 4:30 to 6:30 in the library, or you can make an individualized appointment. So please, continue to think about these things, start working on them, think about what you can do with your LinkedIn. We do have a LinkedIn event taking place on November 7th, so you can work on your profile. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to ask them, and we'll be here for a little bit, continue networking. There's some snacks and some wine still in the back. CBS Interactive brought some cool swag, so take some sunglasses and pens. But thank you again. This was invaluable information, and thank you all for coming. Thank you, Alexander, for leading the discussion and coming up with some awesome questions. So, yes. So thank you. Eat, mingle, do your thing, work it.
And if it's okay, I'm going to write on your whiteboard about our hiring event tomorrow night, plus the email. I don't know if she's still here, but our Chanel Johnson, who does our diversity and inclusion recruiter for the internships. So we are currently hiring. We hope to have offer letters out before Thanksgiving. So I'm going to put her email address, and you just say, Jamila said to reach out. And if you reach out to her, please have a resume attached. It helps. It's okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.